Hello, friends. So I'm surprised more people haven't asked me yet why I haven't commented on the whole Medina Spirit thing, because now that his like necropsy and stuff has come out, and he's now been stripped of his Derby win, and yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I think that's an important industry topic. And then I'm just going to talk about some other things. And yeah, any questions that people have, they can send in the chat and I will try to answer them. But I thought that talking a little bit about the racing industry was important because I think that there's going to be a bit of a dumpster fire on the internet as the season progresses. So, for those of you who are not updated on recent information, they have finally come to a decision with the case regarding Medina Spirit and his Kentucky Derby win. For those of you who don't know about this last Kentucky Derby, basically, this horse tested positive for an illicit substance, and he won the Kentucky Derby. So, there was a whole lot of back and forth about the fairness of that and like looking into it. And Bob Baffert trying to like cover all of his bases and like basically lie his ass off to say, like, oh, like, we just put a cream on the horse and like I didn't know. And like a lot of people support this guy, but like honestly, like from my perspective, like I have not competed or shown or raced at the levels where you're getting drug tested as heavily as someone like him would be. And I would still be extra careful to like double check, especially when you're going into the Kentucky Derby, which is like a $2 million race purse. Like it's like 1.84 million or something. Big money that you're winning. And you're telling me that a man who has been in the industry for like decades does not know what is and isn't legal to give the horse. And especially when we're talking a guy that has had so many positive drug tests over the last few years and so many horse deaths over the last several years. I refuse to believe that a man in his standing was simply unaware of the implications of choosing to use the substances that he did. So anyways, he basically tried to make all these excuses and be like, oh, like we didn't know, oh, my groom must have done that, or oh, like it was just a cream, we didn't treat him with anything illicit, this is a witch hunt, this is so unfair, I'm so victimized. And in the past with like other drugging violations, he's literally tried to blame it on his grooms and get them to testify that they ate a poppy seed bagel in the horse's stall, and that's why they tested positive. And so like he's tried to get people to lie for him on numerous occasions and has been shown to do that. And then like I don't know, the part that I just can't get on board with at all is that like when you've already had this many violations, you will not continue to screw up. Like you'll be extra careful, especially when there's that much money on the line. The reason why he keeps doing this is because he thinks that he's above the rules and that he thinks he can get away with it. And honestly, he's not completely wrong. So I hate how many people are defending this man and being like, "Oh, like this is so unfair. It's such a witch hunt. Like he's a great trainer. Like you can't produce winners without being a great trainer." And it's like, "No, like he's probably able to produce the volume of winners he is despite his program being so rough and tough and like wearing on the horses because of the fact that he fucking drugs them." So anyways, they finally came to the decision to pull Medina Spirit's Derby win. And now people are freaking out, and I've seen so many things regarding this where they're like, "Oh, like poor Medina Spirit, he's lost his legacy." And it's like the horse does not give a flying fuck about losing his Derby win. He does not care. He is a horse, and he's also dead. But even if he were alive, the horse doesn't care or value the win. It does not impact the horse at all. And by people taking the tone of poor Medina Spirit losing his win instead of poor Medina Spirit who fucking died because of being given drugs and like used in a program that's not fair. And like, yeah, maybe it wasn't the drugs. Maybe this case, it was just actually a freak heart attack that killed this horse. Who knows? But I need to reiterate the fact that Bob Baffert has had like 70 horses die on the track in the last 20 years. And that's just what has happened directly on the track. That's not horses they have taken off and euthanized at a later point or that they've just gotten rid of and have disappeared from his program altogether. This is just the number of horses that people have actually been able to track and trace back to him from directly having breakdowns and like sudden deaths on the racetrack. And I refuse to believe, like, it doesn't even matter how big your program is. 70 horses dying just on the racetrack in 20 years is fucking absurd. There is no way there's not foul play involved. And like like, for those of you who don't know what's going on, I'm not gonna go into too much detail on this because I'm gonna say something wrong if I don't get all the court cases together, but, like, Navarro, who's another prominent racing trainer, he's, like, literally going to jail, and a bunch of people involved with him are in this big legal case for drugging, and basically the drugs that they are giving, like, this is gonna be a really loose explanation of them, but they're basically near impossible to test for, and the things that do come up inconclusive. So this is what Medina Spirit's necropsy result followed the same tone of. Your cause of death, but it causes sudden respiratory arrest. Yeah, like basically a heart attack, and these horses just drop dead and die suddenly. There is a track record of this happening under numerous trainers, and the ones that are in court currently are dropping like flies. Like there's vets that are going to jail and losing their licensing. There's big name trainers, there's big players in the racing industry that helps cover this up that are getting in trouble. So it's only a matter of time if people keep pushing for this that Baffert gets held accountable. And because of that court case and because of how many people are getting held accountable for the drugging in relation to that court case, I don't think that the inconclusive necropsies are a reason to continue to defend Bob Baffert, because not finding a clear cause of death doesn't mean that he didn't do anything wrong. It means that he has masterfully developed a program of drugs that he can use that do not test, but that wear the horse so much that he's having a high incidence of death. And this is what was seen in other trainers who are doing the same thing. Eventually, I'm going to do a video on it, but it's like a lot of information to compile, and I'm going to try to find a way to make it succinct and easy to understand. But like, I highly recommend looking into the court case and who's getting in trouble right now, because it has so many parallels to what Baffert is getting away with. And I don't understand why people keep defending him, because like, you just like, you don't have that many horses dying, especially during training, if you were doing something right. And like, let's just say he is doing something right and he actually believes in his heart of hearts this is completely unavoidable. Then we got to ask the question, if this is so unavoidable, then something about the sport in specific needs to change. And to be honest, I don't think that this issue is unavoidable. Even with still racing the horses as 2-year-olds and not really changing a ton of the industry in the grand scheme of things, you could lower the amount of influence trainers like Baffert have by not continually enabling them. And it's really concerning to me that people are turning this onto Medina Spirit and being like, oh, poor horse, poor Medina Spirit, he shouldn't have lost this privilege of having the Derby, because the only people who value that win are the humans. Like, no horse gives a fuck about the Derby win. They're not walking around talking to their horse friends being like, I won the Derby, oh my god. Like, no, if that horse is in horse heaven right now, you want to know what he's fucking saying? He's probably saying, damn, I wish that my trainer hadn't drugged and killed me, because I could have lived a long, healthy life for another 20 years. Or, darn, I wish that I actually got to see the outside once in a while instead of being in a stall for almost the entirety of my 3 years of life. Or, darn, I wish that I didn't hurt so badly. Why is he fucking injecting me with substances all the time? He's not going to be going, oh, fuck, I lost my Derby win because my trainer drugged me. No. And like, bringing it onto like Medina Spirit and feeling bad for him is pulling off the pressure of from Bob. And it's basically saying, feel sorry for him, because if you feel sorry for Medina Spirit and believe that he shouldn't lose the win, what you're actually saying is, hey, like, it's pretty chill if Baffert wants to drug horses. Like, I'm actually okay with this. I don't think he should have to lose any privileges. And I don't know, like, even an ethics aside, like, just for fairness of the sport, it's not fair for one person to basically be immune to any consequence when they continue to make the same mistake over and over again. Like, that's basically just telling everyone that they don't fucking matter and that certain people have a different set of rules. And that's without even factoring in how this impacts the horses. So, like, I see a lot of racing enthusiasts that want to defend Baffert because they view like criticizing him as criticizing the industry as a whole, and I think that's an inherently flawed way of looking at it, because like, if you want to reform the industry and if you want people to view it for like what it is and see the good in it, then we need to start weeding out the bad and holding the bad people accountable, because otherwise there's not really any incentive for people to want to do better if you can keep cheating and if cheaters get special privileges and if you don't get in trouble for doing these sorts of things. So we need to incentivize people to want to do the right thing, and like, that starts with making like compassionate laws and regulations. Like, you can legislate empathy and compassion by making it illegal to be an asshole in the industry. And I think that's where we're at, because people can't police themselves. We've already proven that there's way too many people who will take advantage of horses and will do so at such a large level that they get hailed as like the top in the industry. Like most people aren't like Baffert where they're having that many horses die, we're having that many drugging regulations, but he is the face of racing. And it's like, do we want that face to be the face of racing? Because I certainly don't. Like, I think it's embarrassing and it makes everyone in the industry look bad when people jump to defend him in fear of the industry going under. And ironically, by defending him, they're engaging in the very behaviors that will make the industry get canceled because they're defending someone who is indefensible and who has made enough mistakes that they deserve to be held accountable. And then it makes it look like we don't care. Like we don't care. And yeah, if racing goes under, like every other horse sport is going to be targeted after that because like racing has been such um public like publicly scrutinized horse sport. Once that's gone, their focus is going to turn to all of the other ones which have gotten used to being comfortable being able to do something in kind of the public eye that's not okay and not get in trouble for it. And it's like as soon as you start getting scrutinized as hard as racing is, you're totally fucked because racing is watched and monitored all the time. Like other horse sports have been able to like have like the freedom of like private drug testing and like if your horse gets injured it's not going in any database where anyone's going to find out. Like it's only a matter of time until people realize how many similar behaviors there are that are also part of other horse industries. So even if you're not involved in racing, you should want this to be reformed because if you're involved in sports with horses at all, you should be very concerned about how this reflects as you as a horse person because everyone who's not involved with horses, most of them know what racing is and they'll have an opinion on racing and they will take that opinion and they apply it to all horse people. So if you don't want to be painted with the same brush, we all need to start looking like we actually care about reform because like as it stands, like on such a massive level, there's so many people in the racing industry and outside of it that are literally willing to die on the hill of defending Bob Baffert. And that makes us all look like we don't care. It makes us look like we're apathetic. It makes us look like we don't value the horses. And like, come on. We shouldn't wait until we're like basically like at the cusp of like losing our privileges and our social license to participate in horse sports before we start caring about these things because that'll be too late. Like we need to start caring now and we need to actually care enough to like speak out on things even if it's uncomfortable because like I don't know, like let's say Bob Baffert is as witch hunted and as targeted as he says he is. Let's say people are are trying to sabotage him. If that's the case, researching into that and looking into it and investigating the case actually kind of serves him in finding the saboteur. And if it's really that he's completely not at fault, then he wouldn't be so against being looked into. And if you're really not at fault, you typically don't have a 20 plus year track record of doing the same fucking thing over and over real here. And like, I don't know, do we want someone like him consistently achieving success and winning like millions of dollars worth of race winnings and being like held to as high of a regard as he is? Like, wouldn't you rather someone who actually deserves it be in that same place? Because by holding people like him accountable and rendering them unable to hack the system in the way that they are, then you are opening the doors for people who do things properly and ethically to actually get there. But right now, if Bob Baffert is just pumping all of his horses full of drugs and running them whether they're lame or sound and training the shit out of them even if it destroys their bodies after, and there's other trainers who are doing things that are kinder to the horse but won't get them as quickly to the end goal of like winning the fucking Kentucky Derby, especially when they're competing horses, like they don't stand a chance. And basically, if we keep enabling it to happen, you're telling other people, like, oh, if you want to win, you better be just like Bob because this is who's winning. In order to win, this is what it takes. Check out this guy. He's drugging his horses and getting away with it. And he's winning all the time. So if you want to win, be just like him. That's what we're showing everyone. And it's just like, I don't know, like I feel helpless watching this unfold because it's just like there's so many people that are apathetic and don't actually care to have an opinion on the side or educate themselves on anything, but they're blindly throwing their hat in to defend Bob and be like, oh, like this is stupid, this is witch hunty, because they feel targeted by it and they're worried about having their own industry come under fire, and they're inadvertently contributing to the actual problem. Like, looking like you care about equine welfare is not going to be what takes down our industry. defending mistreatment of horses and bad people who consistently make the same mistakes on such a public scale that everyone knows about it. That's what makes us look like we don't give a shit about our horses. And the more we do this, the more we're just reinforcing this to everyone. Like, hey, like, we'll say that we love our horses, but like when it comes down to actually fighting for their welfare, like it's too uncomfortable and I'd rather err on the side of the person. And this is the tone it almost always takes about any abuse. Like there's the Baffert stuff, the Mark Todd stuff. And like at least unlike Baffert, Mark Todd acknowledged that what he did was wrong. But then you have like hordes of people defending him. And it's like, why? He literally didn't even defend himself. And it's like, why are you defending Baffert? Like, why are you saying this man doesn't need to be investigated? Why are you saying that this should be dropped and that it's a witch hunt? Like, it's like he's had so many positive drugging violations. And initially, when I knew less about the case, I defended him and was like, oh, like, the drugging regulations and stuff are strict and like yada, yada, yada. And then I looked more into like what he's actually done and it's like not defensible because it's such a lengthy track record of the same shit time after time. And like you don't have, if you've learned from your mistakes, you're not making the exact same mistakes repeatedly 20 years down the road. You're not. He hasn't learned. If he'd learned, he would have fucking learned from Justify getting away with his positive drug test and not getting in trouble for that. And he would have made sure that this horse was going to pass his drug test for the Derby. But no, he decided to try again to keep drugging because it's worked for him and he's gotten away with it. He's not learned jack shit. And he never will because we have this fucking rich white guy that has gotten away with everything for like basically his entire career and never actually met a real consequence, not in the grand scheme of things. And he thinks that the rules no longer apply to him. And I highly doubt that applies to just within racing because he's been so enabled in his work and to build this fucking like kingdom that he gets to control and that he can manipulate and that he can make his own rules for. Like he's been so enabled in doing that I would not be surprised if that's reflected in how he treats other people and his life outside of horses. And you can't like I don't know, like you can't have that many failed drug tests if you're actually actively trying because like if it was really that easy and it's such a witch hunt, it's like why isn't everyone else having failed drug tests then? Why is it literally just you like consistently in these big races? If you're truly being witch hunted and like targeted and stuff, first of all, like damn well there's like fucking cameras and shit outside shed row and you'd have people watching those horses. So it's like if that's actually the case, either you suck at hiring help and you keep hiring help that is scamming you, which is still his fault, or you're just a fucking liar, which is obviously the truth here. But yeah, like the Baffert situation is something that I think everyone needs to start talking about and covering and talking about how it reflects on all horse sports because like this type of attitude is not just specific to racing. We see the same types of enabling behaviors in other sports. It's not just specific to racing. People at the top of the sport, because of having prominent big names and making lots of money and winning lots of titles, they get excused for doing a lot of shit that is not acceptable. And that if someone without the name did the same thing, they would unanimously get torn apart. Like, if someone fucking took a video of like any amateur or junior rider doing what Mark Todd did, do you really think it would fly where people are making them a change.org petition saying that they stand with them? I fucking don't. I think that someone like that would probably get bullied off the internet, even if they made a really good apology, freaking adapted all of their horsemanship and actually changed. They would never get treated the same way and they would never get accepted. People would not forgive them and they'd take it way more seriously. Even though, like, in that standing, it should be more defensible because, like, an amateur or a junior rider is less experienced than Mark Todd. They have less experience, less expertise. They're not being perceived as a professional. They're not offering out their information to the masses for literal decades. And they would get held to a higher degree of accountability than he would. And this is what's wrong with the horse world. We hold people accountable based off of how much people like them as a person or like what they've contributed to the horse world. And that is so fucked up. It's not based off of like whether or not they hold themselves accountable, whether or not they show instances of changed behavior, whether or not like what they did is actually defensible. And it's all about status. Like it's never actually about what is like how the horse feels and what is in the best interest for the horses. It's all about status because like honestly, even for me, I've literally admitted to, like, mistakes that I've made in training and, like, how I used to handle bad trailer loading and stuff and would use stuff with, like, punishing and pressure tactics, and even still, even if I fucking released my own video from back then, but, like, there weren't cameras, like, I wish I had more of them because I would, but, like, people would give me shit for stuff that I have done in the past, and they try to hold me accountable for it now, despite the fact that there's, like, that track record of change in opinion and, like, consistent growth as I've adapted and remodeled my practices, people would still be more likely to want to hold me accountable for my past skeletons in my closet than they would someone like Mark Todd or Bob Baffert. And I don't know, like, it cannot be clearer to me that this is a status thing because, like, you're allowed to do certain things and to abuse horses and to take unfair advantages in sport if you're well liked enough, if you're rich enough, and if you're like winning enough. Then you get free passes for certain things. And on the flip side, we look at like beginner riders and you can literally not even post a video of you struggling to post the trot without people being like, you're hurting your horse's back, like fuck you, like you suck, learn how to ride, and just like criticizing the shit out of them. Or like a beginner rider who loses balance and falls off and doesn't let go of the reins right away, and people would be like, oh, like way to tear apart your horse's mouth, you piece of shit. And then those same people will go and defend an upper level Grand Prix rider like Danny Waldman riding around in like a twisted wire gag with a rope noseband and a flash. And it's like, it's not about the horse. It really isn't, because like, let's be real here. A beginner rider accidentally catching their horse in the mouth it might cause the horse discomfort for that moment, but it's not going to cause the same lasting discomfort as a professional who thinks they are right, continually using cruel equipment that causes discomfort. Like, the intent behind it honestly means everything. And when you have a professional who thinks that they are right and will defend anything that keeps doing the same thing, like, those people need to be held more accountable. Like, even the whole, like, this was recent too, the whole Danny Waldman thing with, like, the no turnout thing. Horse and Hound covered her story and interviewed her regarding that and said nothing about, like, equine welfare or anything about, like how this actually impacts horses, and it was all about like her doing damage control. And then they went and they fucking edited the article after people like me freaked out and were like, these are all the resources on why this is bad, why are you condoning this as an article that is supposed to be for the horse. Then they did a sneaky edit where they added in a statement from the World Horse Welfare Organization, and they never indicated in the article that they had edited it. So what this means is they did this sneaky edit to try to make themselves look good and put on a good face, but they did it in a way that makes it look like everyone was freaking out needlessly and further draws a line between us and people who condone all this shit, because they're going, oh, you guys freaked out for no reason. It says right there that the guy from the World Horse Organization or World Horse Welfare Organization says that like that it's bad to not turn horses out, and they added that after the fact. And like honest, like I've taken journalism classes because initially I was going to get a degree in journalism, and one of the key points of journalism is honesty and integrity in journalism. And it is not honest or having integrity to edit an article after you have already published it without stating that you have edited it and putting in the edit and be like edited and adding the date where you edited it. That's not honesty. And it wasn't on Facebook. Like, Facebook has the editing history that does that for you. But like, it was on their website. So they did it in a way that caused more back and forth, that made people look like they weren't credible and that they were taking issue with something that had already been handled. But it was something that they'd edited it after the fact. And the only reason that the person in question was getting defended was because of her status in the horse world. And we see it repeatedly. Like, even recently with this Mark Todd incident, um, like there was like Horse and Hound recently just posted an article on the girl that came out against Mark Todd, where they interviewed like one of her old employers from a few years ago, who claimed that she was kicking and beating the horses and being cruel. And like a lot of people are like, oh well, like, see, this is why she went after Mark Todd. I'm not surprised. And I'm like, first of all, like, as a barn owner, if you're actually concerned about someone beating horses and kicking them and being rough with them, why would you wait 2 years to release that information when that person could be working at a number of different farms in that time? Because like a farm owner, the difference between a farm owner and their employee and perception and amount of control, the farm owner and employer has can fire someone at any point and you can hold them accountable, and you could even fucking put out a person if you wanted to. They chose not to. The difference between a clinician, Mark Todd, who is an Olympian, world-class rider, well-known all over the world, and a fucking amateur rider in his clinic, he has the upper hand. So it makes sense in that scenario why the rider would be nervous about coming out against that and wouldn't know how to handle it. But on the employer side, first of all, I think it's weird that Horse and Hound even covered that article in the first place, because they're doing a smear campaign against someone that's solely based off of hearsay. The video of Mark Todd, he is caught on video doing it. You cannot deny that it happened. But the video with the girl, or like there is no video with the girl. It's literally just the statement of a barn owner who claims that the girl had worked there before. And the person who was in the video with Mark Todd did admit that she'd worked at that place, but she said she didn't recall any of the events that the person had claimed that she partook in. And so Horse and Hound, what the fuck are you doing? You're literally targeting a young person who is like a fraction of the age of Mark Todd and targeting her off of hearsay while trying to defend Mark Todd and say that her posting a video of him doing something wrong is bad. So why is it that it's okay to go after someone who is an amateur rider, who isn't educating people on a world-class scale, who's not teaching clinics, who's not taking hundreds of dollars from people to give them information, who isn't having such a big name in the community that they're respected as one of the best riders in the world? Why is it okay to come at someone like that based solely off of hearsay and post a video with absolutely no proof beyond what someone claims? And do that to try to do like a rebuttal to what she said about Mark Todd when it literally is on video. It's on video. And the man himself said he was wrong. So this is what I mean about status. Why is it okay to fucking witch hunt a singular entity because she spoke out against abuse and come and say something that happened 2 years ago that has no documentation and the barn owner was not concerned enough to tell other employers in the area about? Like, honest, if I hired someone and they were fucking kicking my horses, you can bet your ass that I would be telling people, like, do not hire this person. I wouldn't fucking wait until they came out against an upper level rider and then put a smear campaign on them with no proof. And that aside, like, it's just way too convenient to have some random person want to step up and speak out against a person who is coming up against an upper level rider with proof. That's like too convenient. If it was a legitimate problem that they were concerned about and they thought that this girl was still a risk to other horses, this would have come out sooner. Horse and Hound jumped at the chance to cover that because they wanted to do damage control for Mark Todd, but they did so at the detriment of this girl, and they're basically sending people now to go attack and bully this girl. And like, this is why people don't speak out against abuse. Literally, why would you want to out, even if you have proof, after watching this happen, why would you want to come forward with the proof if it could mean that people will come after your reputation and start shit talking you and bringing up stuff that you might have done several years ago that has no proof of you doing so, whether it happened or not? If this is how people handle it, where even before that article came out, people were blaming the rider, saying that she should have ridden better and then that Mark Todd wouldn't have had to do anything and that it's her fault and that, like, blah, blah, blah. Already people were blaming them, and now this article comes out and it's directing even more blame in their direction, and you're wondering why people would wait to release these videos, because the Mark Todd videos from like summer 2020, and like, people wait to release these videos because you are so at risk by releasing them. Like, you're gonna get targeted and it puts a target on your back and it makes you a freaking, like, you're going to be the scapegoat for the issue, because they would rather have a random rider torn apart than hold an upper level rider accountable and have like the curtain move to show like the actual truths behind the horse industry. And like, yeah, and like the other thing with Mark Todd too is like, I saw people defend it with like saying like, oh, well, jockeys whip their race horses. And it's like, okay, like, just because other people do stuff that's similar doesn't mean it's comparable. And rape whips are not as harsh as a fucking wooden switch branch. And also, an overhand hit repeatedly when you're behind a horse holding a branch is going to be stronger than any hit you can do from the back of a horse using a race whip, which are made to make more noise than they are like cause pain. And obviously they can. And I don't think that race whips make horses run faster. So like I would be on the same page as those people in terms of saying like, yeah, I don't think it's necessary. But to try to like justify Mark Todd's actions in that video based off of like other things like that aren't related is weird. And like, and yeah, like what Marissa said here is even if the claim was valid about the girl abusing horses, it has no bearing on the actual video proof, which is true. All it does is question whether or not that girl would do the same things to horses, but it's questioning it using something that's entirely unproven and is solely hearsay. Whereas the Mark Todd case, you can prove it. You can bet your ass that if she'd come out with no video and just said that he'd done that, no one would have believed her, and it wouldn't have gone anywhere because they'd go, this is just hearsay. Without the video, people would have jumped to discredit her even quicker. And the fact that they're now using the very hearsay that they would not accept if it was about an upper level rider to try to discredit her after she came out with video proof of someone doing something wrong, that's really concerning. And it's so concerning to me that a big news source like Horse and Hound is actually complicit in this. Like, I cannot believe that they actually thought that that was an acceptable article to post because honestly, it's quite boring. It has no fucking information. It's just some random lady who claims that the person was employed by them and that they did something and is coming out now. And like honestly, like an employer could have fired you for like any number of things. Like let's get real. Horse barns, especially barn work jobs and barn labor jobs, they're very exploitive. Like there's a lot of they're like exploitative. There's a lot of barn jobs that exploit the shit out of their people. There's a lot of barn jobs that are unfair, that put their workers in positions where they're overforced, they're being endangered, they're handling animals that are not safe to be around, and they're not given the tools to deal with it appropriately. And the employer is at fault for a lot of those things. And so, like, I'm not inclined to believe the words of an employer, knowing how a lot of horse people treat their employees and knowing the amount of responsibilities that are given to people for free, like for working student positions or for very little pay. And it is so troubling to me to see that our horse world is in such a state where it's like acceptable for a big news organization to come at some random person without any actual proof and release that article, especially to like name the, like, I don't know if they actually named her in the article, but like the video she posted on her account, so you can pretty easily find out who it is. And whether they named her or not, it's like her name is out there. So it's like, I don't know, if you're going to have articles where you don't have explicit proof, because I have had people come forward and tell me things about upper level trainers that they do not have proof of. And like I've written articles on the dark sides of the horse industry and featured these things, but you want to know the difference? I don't fucking name who it is. I don't even like throw a bone in the direction for people to discover who I am talking about because it is hearsay. And yes, like if several different people from different areas tell you the same story about the same trainer, like I'm inclined to believe it, especially if they have no connection. So like yes, but I can't release that information and go so and so did this without any proof of it. And Horse and Hound is doing that. Like they didn't actually say like, oh, she definitely did this. They're saying this person said she did this, but then they're publishing that to the masses, which is like telling everyone like, yeah, this is what happened. And, like, I don't know how that's not coming off as more suspicious to people that that's how they handled the damage control for Mark Todd. And honestly, Mark Todd should be fucking speaking out against that article because he should be saying, look, this is not the way to handle it. Like, what I did is wrong. It doesn't matter what she did. Why are we sending hate in someone's direction for sharing a video that painted him in a bad light? It happened during a clinic. They were filming. They were filming close enough by that I'm assuming he was allowing people to film. Not all clinics let you film for this fucking very reason. Not all clinics let you film. And even if he had a no film rule and they got the clip, like, yeah, technically you should have not filmed because that's the rules. But like at the same time, it's like you don't have to hide what you're doing if you're not doing sketchy stuff. And like I saw a lot of people comment on the Mark Todd situation saying it was taken out of context. And I just want to know in what context it is okay to like overhand hit a horse with a branch 10 plus times. What context are we missing? Because the video to get into the water. And I'm just wondering like text actually justifies his behavior there because like at best it's not an effective way of training. It can leave the horse with more problems than they started out with. and people are paying him money to handle their horses, and he's not handling it properly. He's handling it in a lazy way that is scientifically proven to have fallout behaviors and issues. This is an undeniable fact. I do not care what anyone has to say about whether or not they think this method works. Proven fact about punishment, especially when you're handling fear-related behaviors. So I don't care the wraparound logic random uneducated people use to try to rewrite behavior theory and learning theory. The fact of the matter is that punishment results in a high risk of fallout, especially when you're using it in cases like he is. And if that's your go-to tactic for handling a horse's fear of water, then your toolbox is really lacking. And this man is billing people money for his toolbox to be shared. And yeah, like it's just like it's not fair that like we're holding younger riders who like are at the mercy of learning from people like Mark Todd. Like the other thing I want to point out about the situation is that like let's say the girl did this in her workplace. I don't believe it because of the context of the situation, but let's say she did. Okay. Is that really all that surprising that someone like that would do that if their role models are like Mark Todd and they're hitting horses in the middle of clinics? Is it surprising that someone would resort to punishment if we're defending it constantly in the horse industry and if we are not holding upper level riders who are these people's role models accountable? Not surprising to me. So why is it fair to hold a younger rider accountable that is not a professional, that is going to professionals for advice, that are showing her the very behaviors that she is now trying to be criticized for? Why is it fair to hold someone like that accountable, but not the people who taught them how to have that response in the first place? Because that's literally the logic they're using. People like that learn those tactics from professionals. They are, and like Mark Todd doing that in the clinic shows that he is teaching that tactic. He is showing this as a tactic to use to fix these problems. So if he himself is modeling that behavior, under no circumstances is it fair to hold the amateur more accountable than it is him. We have so many professionals in the industry modeling this very behavior and normalizing it to the masses. And then people try to hold young people more accountable for when they do the very same things that their idols taught them how to do. But then they're like, oh, like, sorry, we're drawing the line where it's not okay to criticize your idols because you haven't ridden at that level. And it's like, okay, so like, you're teaching all your kids to punish and abuse their horses, but they're not allowed to get away with it until they have gotten to the same level as you. If that's the case, then it's pretty clear that all these people know that their behavior is wrong and always has been wrong, and they're only doing it because they know that their status is enough to protect them from the repercussions of it. So yeah, the normalization of this is what's wrong with the horse world. And it's a huge problem that people are viewing it more acceptable to hold someone accountable for behaviors that they were taught by other professionals without any proof than they hold the actual professional. There is no reason for Horse and Hound to release that article other than to try to discredit her, even though there's video proof of Mark doing the thing. You can't discredit someone for coming out and sharing something when they have it on video proven. Like, it is there. You can't discredit them, especially when the whole length of the video shows the intent of the procedure and like what he was trying to accomplish. Um so yeah, like I'm disgusted by news organizations like Horse and Hound. So yeah, and, like, getting to the levels that, like, upper level riders are at costs so much money that it's like, even if you have the talent and the drive and everything you need to get there, you can't without the money unless you get someone that's willing to take you under their wing and get the money. But honestly, that happens so rarely, and most of the people I've had that have come up to me and are like, "Oh, you can do it if you just work hard enough." If you actually talk to them, it becomes really clear that the background they come from, they're just not as rich as the rest of the equestrians, but they take that as them actually being like less fortunate and really struggling even when their parents are still able to like buy them cars, pay for their car insurance, pay for their show fees, keep them in lessons, and so on and so forth. And they'll be like, "Oh, if you work hard, you can really get here." And it's like, I'm not denying the fact that these people worked hard within their within their life and like their privileges, but to try to claim that someone who doesn't have to worry about paying for their own car and like other constant large expenses is struggling as hard as someone who's having to work to pay for all those things, it's just completely false. So Like, there's so many barriers to prevent people from succeeding in the horse world, and it is so incredibly fucked up that we keep increasing those barriers by holding everyone else in the horse world more accountable than we hold those at the upper levels. Like, that is so fucked up. Because the amateurs and the juniors and people who aren't competing at high levels and like lower level professionals, they make up the vast majority of the horse world. People like Mark Todd and like Bob Baffert and like those guys, they're like the 1% of the horse world, and they're catering to all of the other people. And they're not being held as accountable as the very people that they're training and working with. Like, people would have a way easier time coming after the owners of Baffert's horses than they would have coming after him themselves. And this level of immunity to like consequence enables it enables the continued like elitist system in the horse world, because it basically works to silence anyone else's outside opinion on problems because they don't want to hear them, and they're just saying that it's not a problem. Or if you voice them, they'll say that you're like whiny and like greedy and like picky, and like it's like, no. Like, yeah. So it's like so fucked up. And yeah, like the financial aspect of the horse world is like going to be our own undoing, and I don't know. Like, I'm so disappointed to see that Horse and Hound article. And I'm really disappointed to see the reactions to the Baffert case, cuz it's just embarrassing. I don't want to be affiliated with this shit. I've been trying to distance myself from this very type of attitude for a long time, because it was something that I was like grown up into and like taught to do, and like I'm so tired of it. And the fact that someone like Mark Todd is being held less accountable than like the person posting the video, largely like because his career is not going to suffer, but that poor girl is probably going to at least suffer mentally from the amount of feedback she's going to get because of that stupid fucking article from Horse and Hound. And he's never really going to see any real repercussions. Like, I know people saw that he got temporarily suspended from racing, but with the amount of flack that the racing industry is getting right now, that's probably just a damage control decision to just be like, look, we're doing something. Yay. And he's going to be fine. Like, his career is not over. He's fine. And I don't know, like, instead of feeling sorry about people who have had like the utmost privilege in the horse world and who have like a lot of resources and who are respected, instead of feeling sorry for them for being held accountable and missing out temporarily on certain privileges, or yeah, getting like criticism for like their behavior within a specific action. Instead of feeling sorry for them, why don't we feel sorry for the people who never ever got that chance and who never ever will be respected in the same way, despite valuing their horses more and being kinder to them, and perhaps never engaging in the same behaviors that Mark showed in that video. And I don't know, I'm tired of being told that I have to feel sorry for these privileged people for being held accountable for their behavior, but then none of those people feel sorry for people like me or people who have it worse off. Like, lack of finances for their experience, and like get bullied for like little mistakes that they made. None of those people feel sorry for people like that. Like, I've had people tell me I'm whiny and greedy and like selfish and stuff because I'm like, hey, like, it would be cool if the horse world was less elitist. And none of those people want to pause for a minute to sympathize with anyone else. So why the fuck should we feel sorry for them? Like, I don't. And like it frustrates me to see how protected some people are, like, versus other people, because I don't know, like, even for me, I'm just an influencer online. So much shit and less defense for things that are like complete, versus like the amount of like sympathy and understanding, or at least apathy, that Mark Todd has pulled for an action that shouldn't really be defensible. And it's just very clear to me that, like, especially men in the horse world, but, like, especially people at, like, the top level of sport, and it includes women, but men more so. If you're a white man at the top of the horse sport, you're, like, untouchable. And then, like, women who are at the top level of the sport, still more respected, but more likely to meet repercussions. And then, like, everyone else, like, if you're a female trainer at all and you're not at the top of the sport, people are gonna discredit you right away. If you're young, even more so. guaranteed if I had gotten more melanin from my father, I would get even more discrimination and get treated way more shittily. Like, I probably get treated significantly better than other POC because I am so white passing. If I was darker, I wouldn't get that. And I've even noticed that since I started wearing my hair naturally, I garner less respect and people are more likely to say like racist microaggressions. So yeah, like it's really that ingrained, and it's only gonna actually get fixed when people start pointing it out and start not being okay with it. Because, like, I don't know, I appreciate the fact that Mark Todd apologized. I have way more respect for him than I have for someone like Bob Baffert, because Bob Baffert has done nothing but try to evade accountability and deny everything. Whereas Mark admitted that like, that he, Mark admitted that he'd done something wrong, which is great. And like if his behavior reflects that he's learned from that and he's going to use softer methods from now on, then I don't think people should continue to criticize him. But does that video give people a reason to be suspicious of the methods that he would use and be less comfortable, especially if they left their horses unattended with him? Absolutely. And um like do I like yeah, I sorry, I lost my train of thought. And yeah, I don't know. It's like I hate watching it happen because it's just such clear discrimination, but then if you point it out, you're like the whiner and the asshole and someone that's not going to get taken seriously. But like, God forbid you ever criticize an upper level equestrian even lightly, they'll come for you. And like, I want everyone to know too, like for people who aren't like professionals and for people who are like amateur, junior, and like even if you don't compete, what I want you to know is that like these types of people benefit from your lack of confidence, and they benefit from people being too scared to speak up. And like, this is why they always use tactics like, oh, like, you're so stupid, you've never even ridden at that level, you don't know what you're doing, I bet you can't even jump this, or like you can't even ride a difficult horse. And it's all about attacking you as a person and making you feel small. They use these tactics because it makes you easier to control, and it makes it more likely that you will stop talking and that you'll just stop commenting on things. It won't necessarily change how you feel about those things, but it makes it more likely that you will not speak out. And this is why they do it. This is why they call us whiners. This is why they call us bad riders. This is why they're saying that we don't know what we're talking about. It's because it makes it less likely for you to speak out. And it's worked for a number of years. And now we have so much information out there that people who are like told to shut up or told that they're wrong, they can now look up things and realize that that's not the case. And they can garner support from like-minded people, so it's making it easier to stand your ground. But like, to actually see the reform we want to see in the horse world, people are going to need to stand their ground. They are going to need to hold people accountable. They are going to need to notice like inconsistencies in treatment and notice news sources that do shady fucking things like Horse and Hound. This is the second time within the last year that I've noticed them do like something weird where they've like, I don't know, done something that I think lacks integrity. And we need to start holding them accountable. Like, fuck, maybe I'll make my own news station because fuck Horse and Hound. Like, I can cover better journalism than they can with more integrity because, like, they're literally, like, you can very clearly tell their only motivation is to portray stuff that benefits the upper level riders and those that support them. And they're never going to do stuff that outwardly, like, not discriminates, like, targets any of those people, even if it's for a good reason. And yeah, so anyways, that's my rant for the day. Like, stay strong and don't fucking stop speaking out on things because they want you to be silent. They want you to be silent and it benefits them. And also, before anyone goes and starts questioning the Mark Todd video because of the new Horse and Hound article that is like a smear campaign on the person who put out that video, keep in mind that there is a video proof of Mark Todd doing the wrong thing. On the other side, there is just hearsay. So it is pretty clear who is in the wrong and who is trying to just do damage control to try to evade accountability. And I'm not saying that Mark Todd facilitated that, but I do think that if he doesn't say anything about it, that it is a problem, especially since he actually taught the person that they are criticizing, and it just has nothing to do with the topic at hand. Like, if they had a video of her doing something that they could release too, then I guess, but, like, I don't fucking trust it because also, like, if that barn owner is coming out and saying that now in defense of Mark Todd, I find it really hard to believe that she'd actually take issue with someone using punishing tactics at her farm, because then she would be put off by the Mark Todd video as well. But that aside, like, yeah, I have to roll out in it shortly. It's very windy here and very gnarly out, but we got to do horse things still. So I've been waiting for stuff to melt. Also, I just released these sweaters. This is a sample, the very first sample. So the font on the ones that I released, it's smaller, so it's easier to read. But they say "Eat the Rich," and then there's like an explosion, little gas canister here, Banksy running away, smoking, not smoking, that's a match, just kidding. And yeah, they're available on my store for $38 US or $48 Canadian, and you can shop them on the amorequestrian.ca website if anyone is interested, and we're donating partial proceeds to homelessness charities around Canada. And this kind of like fits the topic that I'm discussing, because the rich, like, they are all wealthy, but like this discusses the 1% of the rich, which is like big corporations. So no, if you're wealthy and you imported a horse and you're watching this, I'm not talking about you because you're not a billionaire. But this is about like the billionaires, but also like the rich in the horse world. A lot of them are not billionaires, but they reap benefits that we never get and we never will get unless we demand them. And there are more of us. Need I remind you guys, there are way, way, way more of us. So if we stop supporting these things and if we start speaking actively out against them and showing that we're not okay with it, we actually have all the power. And that's why they're so scared of us. And that's why they're so desperate to do what they can to shut people up, like releasing smear campaign articles like Horse and Hound did. And so they want us to be small. They want us to feel shitty. They want us to feel helpless. They don't want us to organize. But if we organize and we all speak out against these things and start to get more comfortable exercising our voices and talking about the changes we would like to see and calling out people and calling out lack of transparency, consistency, and handling of issues, and so on and so forth, they will be forced happening. Within the last 3 years, the amount of equestrian brands that have finally started to diversify their models because of public outrage models, there's been so many more. So it works. Like, what we're doing is working, and what doesn't work is being silent and apathetic and just shrugging and going, oh, this is the way it is, it's the way it's always been. And it's like, okay, yeah, if this is the way it's always been, isn't that more of a reason to change it? And we have the power. So reminder to all of you, we have more power than like the upper level people do. There are less of them. If we set the tone for things we want to see and start to hold people more accountable and start to demand the type of horsemanship we want to see and what we will support with our money by way of clinics, lessons, and so on and so forth, it'll start to change things. And it already is. So it just requires like consistency. And I wanted to talk about the Mark Todd and Horse and Hound thing, because I think that it's really wrong how Horse and Hound has handled this. And I think that it's an indicator of a really insidious problem in the horse world where yeah, like where they're willing to literally smear other people and hold them super accountable for like either things that are completely unproven, or even if there is proof, that are arguably smaller than what larger riders are held accountable for. But they do it to deflect from the upper level riders. And yeah, like there's so many problems in the horse world that we just all need to address. Shelby, did Day by Day contact you yet? No, they have not. I don't think they're going to. Yeah, so I don't think they're going to. So we'll see. I hope that they did actually do the vet check though, and that they're addressing that horse, because it'll be easier for their kid to ride him if he's more balanced. So yeah. Yeah, and I agree, like all horse competitions need better regulations, and there's problems in all of them. So that's the other thing that I think people need to realize is, even if you have your horse sport that you like, pointing fingers at other sports while ignoring your own is exceptionally easy, but all horse sports have problems and they all have things that need reform, whether or not you participate in those things. And it's not an attack on your discipline to want to better it. It's actually loving it enough to want to make good change. And I think that that's the key, is like if you love the sport and if you love horses, then you should love it enough to reform it. And if you don't, then I think you should question whether or not you love the sport or the horse more, because chances are, if you don't want any reform, or if you're too scared of reform because you don't want to lose opportunities or lose ability to enjoy the horse, you're in love with the sport more than you are the horse, because you're more worried about protecting the sport than you are the horse, and you're willing to sacrifice the horse to protect the sport and not vice versa. And it shouldn't be that way, because also, like most of our sports, you could run them very similarly to how they are run, but change certain things and make it healthier and more ethical for the horse. And that's really all people are asking for. And it doesn't even need to be instantaneous change. It can be like slow picking away at certain problems, but it like starts with people actually acknowledging them and not just shrugging it off. And yeah, all of us have to be a part of that, because you do have to keep pushing for these things consistently and talking about them and bringing light to them. But like, if we don't, like, it's going to be where the sport's not fair for horses. It's also not fair for us as humans. And there's a huge, like, unequal power dynamic. And I want to change that, because like I do agree that there needs to be people in charge, but like the people in charge shouldn't be showing such clear nepotism towards like the other people who are at the top of the sport, because basically like there's a different set of rules depending on who you are. And even like social rules, it's not even necessarily meeting repercussions in the show ring, like social rules, because Mark Todd's getting way more defense than he would if he wasn't who he was. And yeah. And also, we can't make it completely the people, like the person in the clinic's responsibility to tell him off and to like call him out in front of everyone and in front of other people and put themselves in that position, because at the end of the day, it needs to be the professional's job to maintain like ethics for horses, because that's literally their job. We shouldn't be putting all of the focus on like the riders who are taking those lessons to have to try to like have to be like tell these people what's wrong. Like the regulation boards and the people who support and enable these upper level professionals in becoming who they are should be holding them more accountable, so that riders and junior and amateur riders don't have to. And yeah, like this past year has been really, really bad for the amount of public abuses that have been exposed and shown to everyone. So just consider the fact that if you were not in the horse world, if you did not know as many horse people as you do, how you would perceive horse people from what has hit mainstream news sources. You probably wouldn't view them very well. So if we want to change that, we need to start giving opportunity to actually showcase the best of the horse world. And that doesn't mean who is at the top. It means the best ethics, who's talking about changes that need to be made, and who's doing things with horses that should be highlighted and that show the good in it. And those are the people that need more airtime and to be shown in the media, so that we can show people like, hey, look, like we actually do value our horses. And yes, there's been these public cases of abuse, but there's large outcry surrounding all of those cases, and a lot of horse people don't agree with it. We do want to see reform. And yeah, so that's really all it is just caring enough to keep talking on it, but also keeping in mind that like it really shouldn't be perceived as our job to have to hold upper level equestrians accountable. It shouldn't have to be, and the only reason it is because all of our regulatory boards are completely dropping the ball and not doing their jobs, and upper level pros are not following the same rules that everyone else has to. So yeah, this is also something to consider for yourselves on social media. Like when you're on social media, it can be really easy to criticize people for like equitation and stuff, but equitation can be worked on. Like bad horsemanship can also be worked on, but it's a lot more pervasive and more of a problem. So I think we need to stop normalizing the idea that it's okay to just blindly criticize people for their equitation or criticize beginner riders and be harsh on them when we don't hold any upper level professional to anywhere near the same standard. Because I don't know, like I've met more accountability for a lot less than Mark Todd has, and I sure as fuck did not have people trying to smear anyone who doesn't like me. And I don't know. But I'm also a woman, so that's something to consider. There is sexism in the sport, and there is a whole lot of wrongdoing. And like I hope that that branch incident is not an indicator of how Mark Todd typically trains, but because of, like, how it's depicted in front of a clinic with all those people, that's where I be comfortable doing something like that in front of a large being filmed. You kind of have to not see an issue with it. And then he's also highlighting that to all of those riders that are there and showing them that it's okay. And even this like big blow up about his behavior, that can further reinforce to people who were there that agreed with him, that are going to defend him, that it's okay to behave that way even though he's not defending it now. Um, and this is why we need to be more on the same page with what we consider abuses of power in the sport, and like what we're going to consider an ethical violation. Um, because I don't know, like, people can make mistakes, and I know humans aren't perfect. Like, for all we know, maybe Mark Todd had tons of triggers stacked that day. Maybe he got in a fight with his wife, if he has one, before going to that clinic. Maybe he stubbed his toe. Maybe he got stepped on or kicked. This is not me condoning his behavior. I'm just saying that he could have had a bunch of things stacked before that, and then maybe it made him react out of character. Who knows? That aside, it doesn't really matter what caused the reaction. You don't have to support it. And you can say that we don't want to see that, and that we want to see more kindness normalized. And also, the other thing is that, as hard as it is, we do need to be open to the fact that people can change, because otherwise, we're not going to be successful in reforming the horse world. And what I mean by this is that, like, what incentive does anyone have to change if you're always going to hold them to the same level of accountability and criticism as who they were before? So, for example, if Mark Todd shows that he's changed, that he's going to use rewarding tactics to get horses into water and doesn't do stuff like that before, and um and like decides to make those changes, it wouldn't be fair to be like, oh well, 2 years ago I saw this video of you doing, or like 5 years ago I saw this video of you hitting a horse. So, because if we do that, then even when people do put the effort into change and grow and learn from their mistakes, they're still being painted as the same person they were before that growth. And then there's no advantage to them to make that change. So we do need to keep the door open to understand that people can do bad things, but that if they actually put the effort into change and put the work in and are motivated to do so, that they can make very real changes and change who they are as a horse person. Because, like, I used to use very punishing tactics. And it was what I was taught to do growing up. I literally did not have any other tools in my toolbox on how to load a horse in a trailer or address biting other than pressure and punishment. And that wasn't my fault. Like, it was who I was role modeled and mentored by, and like, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there for me to learn otherwise. So it wasn't my fault, but it was my responsibility to learn and change from that. And I have. So if someone tried to say, "Oh, well, you used to do this, this, and this when you showed the Arabian circuit," or like, "You used to use your crop way more, or you used to ride in spurs way more," and like that stuff, it's not fair because you've put the work into change. So we do need to hold people accountable, but then also you need to leave the door open to allow for change and understand that people can change and alter themselves. And it's totally fine to be uncomfortable with someone and not trust them or not want to like buy into their practices again personally. But that's not a license to continue saying that they're doing something the same way without there actually being any evidence that they are still that same person. So hold people accountable, but consider the fact that they can also change, because if they show a desire to change and they show consistency and like want to make that difference, great. Like, for like I mentioned Bob Baffert earlier, he has had like so many drugging violations and deaths over the last 20 years that shows that he's not made an effort to change. So anything he says to the media doesn't really matter, because there's a long-standing track record of him not changing. And that is a reason where people could want to wait even longer before they believe anything he says, because he's a notorious liar, never accepts accountability, and is always deflecting responsibility. But like, we do need to be open for change, and also consider the fact that a lot of riders have been completely misled by people who are terrible role models. And unfortunately, the way the horse world is run enables that happening, because we allow people to be at the top of the sport while they're teaching completely untrue things about equine behavior and training and ineffective methods. So with that in mind, like, it's very easy to become misled, and it's very easy to become one of these types of people that does bad things to horses. So if we actually do want to reform, if we want to reform like the horse world, I think that a large part of that starts with realizing that like a lot of the people who do need the reform, that they have the room to grow and change. So don't write them off as people, because if you label everyone as your enemy and just assume that they won't change, then you're not actually gonna cause as much change as you can. And yeah, like I would agree with what art and animation is saying with, can we ask FEI why they aren't legalizing bits and bridles other than the double bridle at Grand Prix level? I think it's silly. If a lot of people are schooling in snaffles, and if your horse goes well in a snaffle, why should you have to show in a double bridle? I spoke about this in a different live if you want to rewatch that after. But yeah, I think it's weird the horse world is basically setting regulations about how soft you can be, but not setting any real standards for how harsh you're allowed to be. And I think that is a huge issue. And I think that that's like another thing that needs mass change, is like we shouldn't be setting regulations that stop people from using softer methods or more rewards based methods or kinder methods when we're not setting a boundary for how like harsh they can be. And like dressage does have bit regulations that are much better than most sports, but like you shouldn't have to show in a double bridle if you don't want to, because it is more invasive. There's no way of denying that. And people will say, oh, you need it for like all the cues. Okay, maybe you do, but what if there's someone who doesn't and would prefer to show in a snaffle and they can't? If you want to show in a double bridle, like allow those people to do so. Why is everyone being forced to do so? So yeah, food for thought, and just consider holding people accountable at the top levels of the sport. And be mindful of like the huge differential in which how people are treated based off of who you are and what your status is, because like I don't know, the amount that like a show record can earn you in terms of respect is absurd compared to like an actual relevant education and pushing for stuff that's for the best interest of the horse. But yeah, I don't know. I want to see change in the horse world, and I've seen some coming, but it concerns me to see like how many big forces there are in the horse world that are promoting and pushing for the same type of mindset. But anyways, I'm gonna end this here and mosey. But yeah, anyone that's interested in the sweater, you can check it out at my shop page. And yeah, I'm gonna try doing like an actual filmy vloggy video at some point, but it's too windy and cold right now to do it, so that is not happening. But yeah, just yeah, so remember, if you guys see the horse and hound article, take it with a grain of salt. Because you don't really want to just witch hunt someone without proof if you're gonna ignore the man on video who is proven doing something wrong. But anyways, I'm gonna go freeze my ass off in the wind chill now. So yay. Have a good day, everyone.